From the studios of the Pemberton Township Board of Education's Channel 14, it's time to find out what's cooking. Here now is the head of the Food Services Department at Pemberton Township High School and your host, Tim Paroli.
Hello again. Welcome to What's Cooking. I'm Tim Paroli, and today we're going to show you how to make one of my favorites, a veal parmesan. I have found a lot of people are afraid of veal. We'll buy it in a restaurant, we'll order it out when it's on the menu, and a lot of us enjoy it. And yet, when I ask how many people try it at home, we're afraid, because when we see veal in the package at the store, and it looks something like this, we're not sure what to do with it. Or when we have done something with it, it has been tough. Gee, it's not as thin, it's not as tasty, it wasn't as good as when I had it out. Well, today we're going to help you with that. We're going to show you how you can transform that veal into something you're going to really enjoy. Veal Parmesan is kind of it's a favorite in America because we can use from the veal, we use the leg of veal and sometimes parts of the shoulder that I have today. And we cut them into cutlets. And a cutlet is nothing more than a large medallion. Now, what's a medallion? That's a small circular flattened piece of boneless meat. This is a little larger into a cutlet. And commercially, they're dropped into cube machines and tenderized. It makes them an even thickness, cuts up the sinews, and makes them very tender. And then they're breaded through a standard breading procedure and deep fried. Wow, we're going to show you that today. All we need is a piece of veal. Now, this veal, as you can see, is about 1/2 of an inch thick. And we know that when we have a veal cutlet, it's a lot more thin and tender. So what we're going to do when you look at a piece of veal, it should have a uniform light color. Some veal, if it's been grass-fed, can have a reddish color to it. But most of the time, it's going to have a light color to it. And all you want to remember is that we want to remove the bones and we want to remove any of the fats and tendons from that. So I'm going to tip this so you can see it. Right here is a bone. Right down here is another little piece of bone that's connected on the other side here, all right? And then I want to remove these little pieces of fat and any of these blue sinews in here, I want to get rid of those because they are what make the veal tough. So we have a boning knife today, which is a long, thin, sharp knife, and we're going to remove all of those connective pieces and the bone. So what we do is we pull the connective tissue towards us and put our knife away from us on the board, and we just pull that along. You've seen us use this kind of a technique when we scale a fish, and that will take off just that piece of tissue there. And it's very strong, very stretchy, and that's why it's tough to have. It makes the veal very tough. When you cook that, that shrinks and gets very, very tough. Because, as I told you at the top of the program, we're going to take this veal and fry it. So that means we're going to cook it very quickly. So we have a nice chunk of veal there, and we're going to take the rest of this bone out. So I'm going to put the bone facing me so I can hang on to that bone, and I'm going to cut away from myself and down. So if there's any slip, it's not going to be an oops. I can always use that little chunk of veal in the cutlet. So there's the other veal bone there. Take a look at that, and that's another nice sized little piece. Now this one here has that piece of blue in it, and I want to cut that out. So what I'm going to do is just cut on one side of that, leaving it connected, and now I'm going to cut against it on the other side, right down against the board you're going to push, and we're going to separate that. And you can see that's even giving the sharp knife a tough time. That's a very, very tough piece of tendon there. So we have that big piece out of the way. Now that looks pretty good. And then we're going to take the other half and we're going to do the same thing, removing any of this outside connective tissue by pulling on it between the knife and the board. And then we have the bone here, and we're going to just cut against the bone and follow that little piece of bone all the way out and remove it. Now we've got that removed. All I've got left here is the meat. We're going to inspect that to see if there is any tendon in there that we want to remove. Out here on the end is a piece with a large amount of fat right down the side. So we're going to cut that off. I know you're saying, gee, all this work for veal. Well, that's the other reason. There we go. We've got that separated. And now we have our veal ready to be put into cutlets. This one I'm going to cut, but I'm not going to cut this large section yet. Now, instead of dropping this into a commercial cuber, what I'm going to do is hit these with a small hammer, a meat tenderizer. And what I want to do when you're going to tenderize a piece of meat, we're going to hit this in the center and begin moving the mallet around the outside edge of the meat. And what that's going to do is it's going to flatten that piece of meat out, and it's going to flatten it out nice and even. So we're going to go right ahead. And if you have a mallet, they usually have two sides. One is a large size, one's cut a lot smaller. Sometimes there's four sides. Use the smallest side that you have for cutting and pounding. The bigger one will just cube it really, really tough, and we don't want that. We want that cut nice and small so it really tenderizes it. So we start in the middle, and don't try to do it all in one hit. We go right on around with that. Now I've got a little piece of tendon right here. We're just going to split that right there. And I'm leaving that on there because that is so small it's going to cook right away. There. But you'll see that is going to allow me to flatten that right out. There we go. Now I'm going to turn this over so that I don't rip it up. And we're going to start in the middle and pull. As I hit, I'm pulling just slightly to bring that out. And around. And I'll go around one more time. Down on that piece there. There. Now what has happened is we took a piece of veal, and these were approximately the same size. If you look at them on the table, you'll see this one is very short and fat, yet this one here now is very, very flat. And that's what we're after. So that's a cutlet, and that gets put out of the way. By hitting the pieces of meat, we do a couple of things to it. First of all, there's enzymes in the meat that when we break them up, it releases them throughout the muscle and allows them to begin to work on tenderizing that meat. The other thing that we do, the physical action, is going to actually break down the cells and the tendons in it, and it's going to let those muscle fibers flatten right out. So we have two actions going at the same time here that are going to make this more tender. So we hit that one, and you'll feel on the differences of the meat that certain areas might be more resistant than other areas. So you just hit them a little harder or a little bit longer. And you'll see that they'll begin to break down and they'll flatten right down just like that. There. So that's our second cutlet. Now, if I was not going to make cutlets out of the rest of this veal, if you wanted to keep this for stewing or anything like that, I still recommend patting it down and making it more tender. Because if we take this and pat this down, and then I want to cube this later on, it will pull back into a cube shape. Although it will be much more tender than it would be if we didn't do this to it at all. So we can get all of our veal ready all at one time. And then we can use it for whatever we want. So when you buy that little packet of veal, make sure you have a tenderizer and get it all ready to go all at one time. There. Now our cutlets are all done, and I'm going to just put them aside. And what I want to show you is something, if you've been a viewer of this program before, we've shown you a standard breading setup, and we're going to do that for you again today. The reason we do it is because so many of the foods we prepare commercially are breaded, and they're not always deep fried. However, this kind of a breading that we're going to show you today will hold up well under deep frying. It'll hold up well. We're going to saute it today. You can also use this breading and bake these items. So any kind of a meat or cutlet that you want to bread, this is the way to go. Step one that you're going to need is flour. So I have them in a shallow pan. And unless you really like to clean up, you can't beat these flat little pie pans. These, I can do a lot of cutlets, or I can cut these into little nuggets and make veal nuggets and run them right through the breader here, and I won't have a problem with it. I want to talk to you about these crumbs. If you take a look at these crumbs, you'll say to yourself, gee, they look bigger than the ones I have at home, and they may be. If you have a food processor or a blender, freeze some bread and drop it in there. Old bread, throw it in the freezer, and you will get these nice, big, fluffy breadcrumbs. And commercially, they're called a green crumb. Green meaning that they're very fresh. And they're going to give you a nice texture on the outside of your breaded item. They're also sometimes used, Oriental style foods use a fresh breadcrumb. So we've got a couple of eggs, and we're going to beat them up. And then to the beaten eggs, I'm going to add a little bit of milk. And that is our egg wash. So if you're going to remember what we're showing you, we're going to go through the flour first. Then we're going to pass our food product next into some beaten eggs and milk, and that's called an egg wash. And then it's going to go into the breadcrumbs. And we will have our items ready to do whatever we want with. We can even take them once we do this to them. We can take the item and freeze it. It doesn't have to be used right away. You can bread up all your veal, lay it on a cookie sheet with some paper between it, and freeze them. And they can be cooked right from the freezer. So you now know how to prepare food for later use. There we go. We shake off the excess, just like that. And now it goes into the egg wash, just like that. We make sure that the egg coating covers all of the cutlet, just like that. And then we take that and it goes right into the breadcrumbs. And we press those breadcrumbs right on there. If you're going to be doing quite a few of these, you want to practice keeping one hand wet and one hand dry. Otherwise, you'll look like you're wearing boxing gloves while you're working and you can't pick up a thing after a few minutes. You'll have more breading on your hands than you do on anything else. So we've got our cutlets all ready, and that is all that we have to do to prepare them. And you can see, when I put this on the board here, we've got a very nice breaded veal cutlet. So we're going to bread the rest of these, because it's always best with a breaded item if you can bread it and wait a few minutes before you fry it. So we're going to bread them, and they're going to rest a couple of minutes while we get set to show you when we return from our little break. We're going to show you how to make a nice sauce, a very quick tomato sauce that's going to go over top of our veal, and we're going to turn these into a veal Parmesan. So remember, when we bread these, it's flour, egg wash, and breadcrumbs. And I'm going to continue this till you come back.
Yo, you want to play some baseball?
No, thanks. I'm gonna chill.
Dude, want to get some rock and roll tonight?
Nah, I'm just gonna hang.
Hey, man, want to do some skateboarding at the mall?
Nah, I'm not into it.
You thought smoking pot would take you places you'd never been. So how come you're going nowhere?
Welcome back. What we're going to do now is take a saute pan that I've warmed up, putting a little oil in there, and we're going to saute off our veal. Now, all I'm going to do is let this pan come up to temperature, and we're going to put our cutlets in there. That's not so interesting. What should be of interest to you is we are going to be able to prepare a sauce very quickly, a tomato sauce. What you need is some tomato paste. Now remember, tomato paste will take on a large amount of liquid, and I'll set that right back there. So we're going to put a little bit of tomato paste into that, and then we're going to season that with, I have approximately 2 small cans of paste in there. So we're going to put about a teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon and a half of salt, maybe a teaspoon of black pepper, and then we're going to put in there a tablespoon, rounded up nice, of basil, and a flat tablespoon of oregano. Then I'm going to put in some oil. Then I'm going to put in a teaspoon of chicken base, and I'm going to put in a teaspoon of beef base. Then I'm going to put into there a little bit of grated cheese. Now, if you take a look, what I've got in there is everything but the liquid that we need for that. And I'm going to put that on our fire, and I'm going to begin to warm that up, and I'm going to begin to add water to that. Now, before I add my water to that, I've got a saute pan here that's ready to go. I know a saute pan is ready because what I can see is the oil, and if you take a look, what you can do if you're not sure at home is just pick a little bit of the breading off of your item and drop it in there. And if it bubbles up like this just did, then you're all ready. And you know that the oil is hot enough and you're going to be able to saute your items. So what you're going to do then is pick up your cutlet, and we're going to lower it into the oil and let it fall away from us. Nice and easy, just like that. All right, and we're going to put our second one in there. We've got a pair of tongs handy. We're going to just move that right out of the way. All right, so we have our pair of cutlets cooking away. I want to move some of this out of the way. And I'm going to let that cook until I see that one side is very brown. Now, what we're going to add to our sauce is about a quart of water. And we're going to stir that, and then we're going to see the consistency of that. Let me get a nice fire under that too now so that gets going. And that's going to tell us whether or not we need more liquid to that. And depending upon the density of the paste, that will determine how much water you have to add to that. Now, the reason we can cook this so quickly is that in order to make tomato paste, we take tomatoes and they're cooked very, very slowly for a very long time. So that's going to have a real cooked tomato taste to it. Now, the texture of this sauce is going to be very smooth. And if you don't like a real smooth texture in your sauce, what you can do with that is add some diced tomatoes to that. Now I'm going to check and see if these are ready. Yes, they are. I'm going to turn them over. Now if you take a look, you'll see the color of those is browned up very nicely. All right, and that's what we look for, that nice, even color, and that's what those fresh breadcrumbs do for you. They give you a real nice color. They'll brown up very, very nicely. Now I'm going to pull the sauce over here so you can see how thick that looks. Now that sauce is very thick also, and what I want to do with that is we're going to just throw a little more water in there till I get the consistency that I want. You might look at that and say, gee, that's a real nice thick sauce, and leave it. So you adjust the consistency of the sauce by the amount of water you add to it, because we already have all of the flavor that we want in there because we have put in the two bases, the chicken and the beef. So that's the consistency I want right there. Now, after I got our cutlets ready, what I did was I took a couple of pie pans. I'm going to reach over and grab them. And I sprayed them because I don't want my cutlet to stick to that. And I don't want to really have to continue cooking that over this fire. So now I'm going to take that, move that, turn one burner off. And we're going to take the cutlet out of the fry pan. And I'm tipping the pan so that all the oil runs one way, and I'm draining that, and that one goes right there. Same with this one. We drain them real good. The questions I usually get after doing a program, or when somebody asks, how do you make a veal cutlet? What do you do if you have a lot of them to do at once? Well, what you would do is you would just saute them all off like we just did, and you would line them up on a sprayed cookie sheet. You could do a dozen of them with no problem on a cookie sheet. And then by the time you have them all done, then you can put the sauce on them like we're doing and sprinkle them with some shredded cheese. Now, just put the cheese up in the middle, because as this melts, it's going to run all over. So we put that in the middle just like that, right on top of the sauce. And that's going to seal that right in there. Give my sauce another stir here. And then we're going to just take that and put that right into the oven. And you'll see these are going in at, I think we're only at 300 degrees with this little oven, and we're going to tell you about that in a second. And what happens with this oven, we'll go to 3 1/4. This oven is a little different than an oven you have at home in that it is a convector oven. That means that it is a regular oven with a fan. And the fan takes the oven and takes the temperature and moves it completely around. So even though the temperature is the same, it will reduce our cooking time by half. So, and you can lower the temperature and the cheese is going to melt right over top. So that's what we're after. Now, I didn't taste the sauce when I put it over top of the veal because the sauce is with the veal and the cheese, and if I messed up, it's going to fix it, hopefully. But before we would put the sauce over pasta or anything else like that, we give this a stir. And then I want to see how we are. Yeah, that's nice. Now, tomato sauce, most of you think that when you're preparing it, it's going to take you forever to make. What we have made for you today is essentially a pizza sauce until we cook it. And we also changed it when we added our base to that. So our main ingredient in making this tomato sauce is the tomato paste, which is nothing more than a very strong, concentrated tomato. The other two flavors that we have that are very concentrated and very strong, I'm going to show you about. If you've seen a previous program where we've used this product, you know what we're using. These are called bases. And what they are is a concentrated chicken and beef. One is made from the concentrated cooked chicken, and that's the yellow one that I have here. It also has a lot of spice, comino powder is in here, and turmeric, and it's in a very slight amount with chicken fat and chicken meat. And that's going to be a very strong mixture of spices that can overpower a food. However, if you use them in a base, they're only going to add a little bit to that. And the same with the beef. The beef base, if it's a high quality like ours is today, it's not going to have a very high salt content. So we can use that in the place of bouillon cubes or in the place of beef or chicken stock. So you're going to find that those products do not take up a lot of room on the shelf. And that's something with storage is very nice. They're very highly concentrated. All you have to add to them is water. And when you use them in conjunction with something like our tomato paste, you're going to find it makes a sauce that you can present, and it's going to be very tasty. And that's what we're after. We want to make a food that is not going to be really difficult for us to prepare. You can eliminate buying a lot of prepared items by just purchasing some of these commercial items that we use here on the program, and they are going to make it very easy for you to use. All right, so enough about the sauce. Let's take a look at it. Again, like I told you, the difference with this sauce is it's going to be very smooth. If you have to fake some people out, what I want you to do is when you're going to make this sauce, you can add at this point, once it's done, a can of diced tomatoes. Now the plum tomato is very nice, a diced plum tomato, or even a regular stewed tomato that's been diced is very nice to add. And that will work very well. But this is a nice all-around tomato sauce. And I did it right in front of your eyes, so there's no magic here. This one is just really quick because of the ingredients that we use. They're already cooked, and that is what gives us the time. I want to go over and pull out our veals because I'm sure they're done, bubbling away there. The reason we can get this stuff done so fast is because we are using a hot veal. We used a hot sauce, and we put that right in there. So it's all ready to go as far as heat goes. They're going to cook very quickly, and that's what we're looking for. I mean, as much as time as I spend in the kitchen, I don't want to live there forever if I don't have to, especially when I'm hungry. I want to get in, get out, and have something to eat. So here's our cutlets already done, and the cheese is already melted, and all we're going to do is just pull them off of there. And if you look in our pan, there's not much juice, there's hardly any oil, because we sauteed them and we drained them. So that gave us a nice product. We're able to lower the fat content. Also, in any of these items that you see made, you can substitute any type of oil, or if you wanted to get rid of the oil in a dish like this, the way you would prepare this is, instead of sauteing it, you could put it right on the pie pan or a cookie pan, sprayed kind of heavy, put that right in the oven, and that I would recommend raising the temperature to around 400, because we want to get the coating to crisp up on the outside so it will seal it in and it won't crack, and then you just cook them till they're finished in the oven. Then you would remove them from the oven and sauce and cheese them like we did here. Preparing your own cutlets is very easy to do. You can set them up as I told you. This one is ready for our freezer. We would just wrap this up and put that in the freezer, and then we can cook it right from the freezer. This would go right into our saute pan frozen. And the only thing that you would remember is that when you're cooking them frozen, whether you're going to saute them or you're going to bake them off in the oven, is to add about 5 to 10 minutes cooking time. And that's really the only thing you have to worry about. So when you're using our breading procedure, remember, number 1 is flour, number 2 is our egg wash, and number 3 is our breadcrumbs. So making veal Parmesan on What's Cooking is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Thanks for watching.